Hey there, welcome back to another stewardship conversation. I'm Katie Jones, and if we don't already know each other, I'm a faith-based money coach, and I help young professionals learn excellent money management skills that are rooted in the gospel. Today, my friend David and I, who is a Christian financial planner, will discuss a question regarding ETFs and how to pick companies to invest in. We've had a similar discussion about this in the past, but today we get a little bit more specific on how we can kind of approach this as Christians when companies have made decisions about how to gain money or how to make money that do not align with our beliefs and values as believers. Before we dive into this episode, this conversation, I want to share with you two Bible verses to keep in mind as you listen to this episode. The first one is Proverbs 10:2, which says, "Ill-gotten treasures have no lasting value, but righteousness delivers from death." And the second one is Leviticus 19:13, which says, "You shall not oppress your neighbor, nor rob him. The wages of a hired man are not to remain with you all night until morning." The way we invest our money really is important as believers. We have to be careful about how we are making our money. And if we're investing, we have to be careful about how that company that we are investing in is making their money. Again, this whole discussion is always something that you want to bring to the Lord to discern for yourself. But keep these Bible verses in mind as you evaluate what you are going to do with your money and how to invest it. Before we get started in this conversation, I do want to remind you, if you do have any questions on your finances, whether it's investing or budgeting or saving money or making money, please drop your question in the comments below, or you can submit it anonymously by going to the form in the description of the video below. We would love to answer your question in the future. This is always from a biblical perspective, and we always bring you some practical advice as well. So with that, let's get to this conversation about ETFs with my friend David. Well, welcome back to another stewardship conversation. I have my friend David here with me again to discuss this question that we received from our friend Sean. So Sean asks us, or more, he says first, "I don't invest in ETFs because many of them have sin stocks in them. Can you please give me your opinion on companies like Exxon and Chevron who extract oil from the earth, but oil is also made in products, made for many products than just gas, that is to benefit man, like tires?" He says, "I also struggle with pharmaceutical companies like Johnson & Johnson that were all involved in that opioid scandal, but make many products that also help people." So, Sean, this is a really, really good question. And I think first off, David, I would like to address, in the beginning, he kind of mentions just ETFs and sin stocks, and then we can kind of go into maybe some specifics, just some ideas on how to look at companies from an ethical standpoint when it comes to things like taking out oil and developing specific drugs that people don't agree with. So let's first start off with that, with just ETFs and this concept of sin stocks. What does he mean when we say sin stocks?
Yeah, so sin stocks, and thanks for having me, Katie. I'm super excited to be here. So sin stocks kind of got this. This idea came from where the concept where you might profit off of someone else's addiction. So originally it was centered around tobacco and alcohol, right? So all the way back until you can think alcohol and tobacco have kind of been viewed as traditional quote unquote sin stocks because they're profiting off of someone else's addiction. And so that concept has kind of stuck around, but has been expanded by environmental social governance teams, ESG, but has been kind of refined in the biblically responsible investing movement, the BRI movement. And so people might hear faith-driven movement or BRI, biblically responsible investing movement, but there's a lot of different faith-based mutual funds, faith-based ETFs that are focused on removing. So there's kind of three different parts when you think about sin stocks or stocks that you might not want to incorporate. So the first one is avoid, and where we would see sin stocks being in this framework, the three-part framework would be the avoid section. So we'd want to avoid stocks that would be, harmful or hurtful to others. The second part would be embracing. So now that I've avoided any sin stocks, so maybe things that a Christian wouldn't be interested in investing, like abortion, pornography, tobacco, alcohol, things like that. What would we want to be invested in? And that's the companies that we would embrace. And so that's the second part, embracing for good, right? Embracing those companies that are encouraging human flourishing, that are providing life-giving, clean water and medical tools. And then the third part is the engagement part, and that's where we can have an influence on the companies by either investing in them or not investing in them. Right? When we give money, when we invest money in a company, we're saying that we support that company, and we're taking a profit off of it. And when we don't invest in a company and we let them know why we're not investing, we're saying, hey, because of these sin stocks that you own or that you're involved in, whether it's a mutual fund or if it's the direct company, we're not going to align our investments with that value system. So that's the third part of the investing or not investing in sin stocks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's honestly, I think you described that really well. I feel like it's one of those phrases that I've heard, sin stocks, and kind of have a general idea, but I really like how you kind of described how it's transformed even from just these addictions to now encompassing other things that people strongly want to avoid, especially us as believers. There are a lot of different things that we do choose to avoid that others might not think is as big of a deal, or they may support in some ways. So I know that it was pretty hard before to find ETFs that were more biblically sound, in a sense, like that had this biblical mindset. Can you describe now, like, how do we find these ETFs? Where can we go? Maybe who do we talk to find these to be able to invest in?
Sure, yeah. A lot of companies have kind of come out over the last like 5 or 10 years, specifically in this faith-driven investing movement or the biblically responsible investing movement. And a lot of them centered around mutual funds. So traditionally, mutual funds have been around for a long time, and mutual funds are kind of where the basket of stocks live. But in the last few years, ETFs have become a bigger option for many investors. ETFs, exchange traded funds, act very similar to stocks, and so you can buy in at different times of the day, and you can actually sell at different times of the day. And so some of the newer players to the biblically responsible investing ETF movement are companies like Inspire ETFs. So they, in the last few years, have come out with a number and a whole host of ETFs. The other one is Timothy Plan. Timothy Plan actually came out with several different ETFs. So they were traditionally mutual funds for 20, 30 years, and they just recently came out with ETFs here in the last like 4 or 5 years. And so a lot of different players. There are smaller companies that are coming out and supporting the ETF movement to help with indexing and just helping people have a little bit more tax efficiency. But yeah, there's a huge gamut of opportunities there.
Interesting. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. So that was definitely very helpful for myself as well. Yeah, so before we wrap up this question today, maybe give us a couple thoughts on how to approach some of these other specific companies. When we hear of big scandals, whether it's with drugs or with oil, with anything else, when we hear of these big things going on and we hear about choices that companies make that we really don't agree with, how do we as believers just approach those companies when, like Sean said, these companies typically have really great products that they also produce, but then they may produce some kind of service or good that we don't agree with, especially from that biblical perspective. How do we as believers kind of approach those companies, and especially when it comes to investing?
Yeah, so going back to that three-part framework, the avoiding, embracing, and engaging, I think that really helps in the mind of a believer. Like, what can we do, right? So the first part is avoiding. We're clearly avoiding companies that are involved in, let's say, manufacturing abortion products. And then the second part, embracing. Embracing, we can embrace those good companies. The third part here, though, is engaging. And I think we as Christians can take a stand and say, hey, we are going to vote with our dollars, in a sense, and align our money with our morals. But it really takes people from around the globe to influence companies, and part of it is investing or not investing with the company, but the other part is at shareholder meetings and being active with engaging with those companies as well. But when we think about should I invest with those companies if they do have good products, but then also have bad products? I always think about the framework of would it be okay if or if someone approached me and said, "Hey, we do these amazing things that are life giving, and we're producing clean water and all these things, but we also provide abortion drugs and we profit off of abortions. Like, would it be okay if that was just a small fraction of our business line?" Like for me as a Christian, I would say, man, I'm really passionate about the life giving tools and procedures and medicines that you have, but I just can't get on board with the 10% or 5% or whatever it is of the abortion pills, as an example. And so I think every Christian just needs to understand, like, is God okay with that? Like, really search your heart, search God's word, and understand, like, if I want to align truly 100% my faith with my investments, like, what are the things that I can be doing today, but then also for eternity, right? Every dollar that we have has an impact, and we can set an example and a standard for not only our own family, but for the generations to come.
Yeah. I think that's a really great way to explain it, David. Um, it's definitely like an ethical question that it comes down to. Are we okay with sacrificing one to save many? It's kind of that circular discussion that many of us have probably gone through some sort of course on at some point, or have come across that question of like these really ethical, very hard to decide decisions. And we do need to consult the Lord and ask him what will be the best decision for us and for the resources that he's entrusted to us. And so I really appreciate your thoughts today on these questions, especially when it comes to investing, since you are a professional in this area. So I definitely really appreciate that. If you are listening and would like to ask a question for us to answer in an upcoming episode, please put them in the comments below here on YouTube, or submit them to our official stewardship conversation form. Either way works. We'll get your question and we'd be happy to answer it in the future. All right, David, thank you so much. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Katie. Bye bye.